so much to the team at BEST and the team at Radiant and Bright who have organized this much needed event. When I started studying architecture about 5 years ago, I would have loved to have gotten an opportunity like this, to be at an event like this. So it's really great to see that, we're starting to see work being done that's going to help us move that needle towards a much more diverse and inclusive built environment. I do have to give a caveat that I struggled with stuttering when I was quite young. So if you do catch me struggling to pronounce a word, please be patient with me. But I have had a bit of a practice, so I feel really confident to speak with every one of you here today. So I'll be speaking on the power of a dream and how my journey into the built environment from the young girl I was back in Nigeria with a dream to the work that I'm currently doing, advocating for race equality and more representation in the industry. When I was 12 years old, I had a dream of becoming an architect. I was a young girl growing up in northern Nigeria with all the energy in the world. My dad was a chemical engineer, so he was quite like Dr. Oli there. And he would bring me to work with him on some occasions. And I would have a go at wearing his helmet and playing around and pretending to be an architect on site. And I also had a teacher in primary school who had studied architecture, and I loved everything about him, from the way he wrote to the stories he was telling me about some of the works that he has worked on. I just knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. Well, society had a much different plan for me, because it did not take too long for this society to start imposing its ideals on my dream. I vividly remember a conversation I had with one of my teachers who made sure to remind me that, well, as a woman, you shouldn't be working in a career like architecture, which is really for the men. And that I was better off at home, looking after the kids, being a mom, doing what the women are supposed to do. I thought for a moment, does this mean that there are certain careers that are meant for men and others for women? Mind you, I was young, naive, and these were my formative years when I was forming my idea of what the world was. But I was stubborn. And I said, that can't be true. I went to my dad's office and I believe I saw a few women there. So I went on Google and I looked up women in architecture. And I found stories of women from all around the world who were killing it. From the story of architect Olajumoke Adenowo, a renowned Nigerian architect who was arguably the face of architecture in Nigeria, to the story of architect Zaha Hadid, who was killing it. He was a trailblazer who was showing that it is possible for women to exist and thrive in the world of construction. And so I decided I'm gonna prove my teacher wrong. I'd like every one of you to take a moment to look back at the younger you when you started this journey. What were your fears? What motivated you to start? What has kept you going all these years? I will come back to this shortly, but let's continue this story. During my high school education in Nigeria, I worked really hard and I succeeded in coming out top of my class. And my hard work and ambition and resilience paid off when I was offered a fully funded scholarship to study architecture at the University of Edinburgh. And just last year, I'm happy to announce I graduated with flying colours.
Yeah.
In fact, I was awarded the Sir William Darling Memorial Prize by the Vice Chancellor and named a Rare Rising Star by an organisation called Rare Recruitment for achieving the feat of becoming one of the top 3 Black students in the whole of the UK. So in a way, I proved my teacher wrong because I was chasing my dream. It was during my studies, however, that I fully appreciated the reality of being an other in the construction industry. You see, before Edinburgh, I was just Aisha, a young, bubbly, ambitious girl with a big dream and a heart that's larger than hers. But when I moved abroad, when I came to Edinburgh, I was now perceived and viewed as Aisha, but Aisha, the Black Muslim woman in architecture. Whenever I tried to take up space in a room, whenever I took up an opportunity, whenever I tried to get out of my comfort zone and put myself out there, apply for jobs, I was always reminded of my identity. In a way, I was put in my place. Picture this. You walk into an industry, a young, enthusiastic girl with a dream. You realize you have to work twice or thrice as hard to reach the goal. But you try because you're stubborn and you're strong. You can do this. But the adversity you face is a structural one, and you're forced to shrink. You're forced to tone down your dream, and little by little, that spark you once had is gone. Since graduating university, I took a career pivot into a more artistic role. And I am exploring the realms of entrepreneurship as a founder of a startup in Edinburgh called Janki Robotics. Some of the reasons for my pivot are the low pay, the mental health issues, the high tuition fees and high living costs associated with the long education compound with inaccessibility issues in architecture. Since I completed my degree on a scholarship, I didn't come from a background that was financially able to afford the further studies that you need before you could qualify as an architect. Now, whilst I made the hard decision, like many others like me, to part ways with their childhood dreams, I am still passionate about advocating for better diversity and inclusion in the built environment. My story, though, is a part of a larger picture of diverse talent with a similar dream. It is the story of Eleni Kariakou, an alumni of the Bartlett School of Architecture, whose dreams of becoming an architect was shattered in the face of the toxic culture of bullying, sexual misconduct, and racism in her university. It is the story of Stephen Lawrence from Southeast London, whose dream of becoming an architect was never realized. On 22nd of April, 1993, at the age of just 18, Stephen was murdered in an unprovoked racist attack. He didn't know his killers, and his killers didn't know him. It is also the story of the Scottish Ghanaian architect, Leslie Loco, who was forced to resign from a senior leadership role in an architecture school less than a year into the post, citing a crippling workload and a lack of respect and empathy for Black women. The structural inequalities that exist in society is one of the reasons for the lack of diversity in the highly skilled construction industry. There are many more, though, who defy the odds and despite this, enter this space. But only few make it to the end. It is not simply because of their lack of resilience or hard work or dedication. It is simply about the system and how it is currently designed to kill dreams instead of nurture them. But what about the system makes people leave? Why is the attrition level so high? Well, the clue can be found in the distinction between diversity and inclusion, which needs to be fully understood. As Werner Myers rightly said, diversity is being asked to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. If we aren't all invited to the party, how else am I going to teach you my African dance moves? Or how else am I going to take part in a fun Kaylee dance? We shouldn't stop at diversity. We must foster a culture of inclusion, a culture that is open to change, one that not only accepts diversity, but celebrates it. As Ollie spoke to, in an inclusive environment, teamwork and cooperation can thrive. And this can drive a much more productive, innovative workforce and an even much more financially sustainable business. A recent study from McKinsey found that diverse workforce were much more financially successful than less diverse workforce. And I can go on and on about the studies, about the data that backs the point that I'm trying to make here today. But it won't humanize the problem, which is why I've taken the time to cite case studies of real people who had a dream, but unfortunately haven't been able to realize that. Remember I asked you earlier about your childhood dreams. I'm going to go back to that question I posed earlier. How would it feel to be told you cannot realize that dream? And the reason being something that is beyond your control. Something that you have no say in. You couldn't work harder and change it. You couldn't do anything to change the fact. How would that feel? We have more work to do. We have more work to do so the Scottish girl in Glasgow who plays Lego and watches grand designs on TV can realize her dream of becoming an engineer when she grows up. We have more work to do in leveling the playing field and removing the barrier to access the field so that the black kid in East London can consider a career in construction. We have more to do in fostering a company culture that promotes diverse talent so that they can be visible in senior leadership roles. So that when another Aisha goes on Google and looks up women in architecture or women in this field, they can find case studies of people who are not just within the field, but are taking up a position of leadership. Guys, I know I've said a lot and the tone in the room is a bit depressing, but there is hope, right? So I ask you all, if you feel the same emergency that I do, if you feel the same urgency that I do, if you feel the same passion that I do, if you feel the same hopefulness that I do, I have no doubt that we can level the playing field and make it possible for everyone to be able to have a space in this industry, regardless of their background, their race, their gender, or even their sexual orientation. Thank you so much for listening.